everyone, and welcome to the Technologies, Strategies, and Methodologies of Promising Explorers panel hosted by Six. I'm very pleased to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have Joe Price, the VP Exploration of Ethos Gold, Luke Alexander, President, CEO, and Director of Nucor Gold, Roger Moss, CEO and President of Labrador Gold Corp, and Adrian Fleming, CEO and Director of Gold Island. Before we begin the discussion, as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll try to get to them after the panel is over. And as always, this event is being recorded and will be available to watch afterwards on Six.com. But just to kick things off, if we can each just briefly introduce yourself and your company, starting with you, Joe.
Hi, thank you for inviting me. Yes, I'm Joe Price, a geologist and current VPX of Ethos Gold Corp. Ethos is a discovery-driven exploration company with a strong and diverse technical team led by Dr. Rob Carpenter, I'm sure you're aware of. And currently we have 9 grassroots properties that are either we staked by ourselves or through partners or have acquired, and that we feel have been technically overlooked for lots of different reasons. And we're looking to bring up these properties to a drill-ready stage to make a significant discovery. We'll be drilling about 2 of these in the short term. That's our Two Good property in Newfoundland and our Heaven Lake property in Ontario, with at least another 2 moving up to drill-ready stage by the fall.
Great, thank you. Welcome. Luke.
Yeah, hi, I'm Luke Alexander, President and CEO of Nucor Gold. Nucor is advancing the Enchi project in Ghana. It is a district-scale exploration project underpinned by a PEA that we put out last year. Very robust economics within that PEA, but really the focus for the company is the 90,000-meter drill program, which is underway. It is the largest ever drill program on the project. We've currently defined 4 resource areas. We've also made 3 new discoveries on the project, and we're also going back to some previously drill tested areas. So advanced stage exploration in Ghana.
Great, thank you so much. And Roger.
Oh, hello, everybody. My name is Roger Moss, President and CEO of Labrador Gold. We are a gold-focused exploration company focused in Eastern Canada. We have projects in Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland and Labrador, both parts of Newfoundland and Labrador, actually. But our main focus in the last 18 months has been in central Newfoundland at our Kingsway project. We've got to the stage now where we're about 30,000 meters drilling in a 100,000 meter drill program. And we've made a couple of discoveries over the last 18 months, and we've got a lot more drilling to do, and we're pretty hopeful that we're going to continue that discovery rate.
Great, thank you. And finally, Adrian, please introduce yourself.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Yes, Adrian Fleming, Gold Island Inc. We are a new company working in Newfoundland. We're focused on gold exploration. We are still private, probably listing in May. Our focus is on 7 different project areas in Newfoundland. One has had previous work with nice looking gold grades on the surface, and then the rest are greenfields projects, and those were identified by Sean Ryan, who's a prospector that many of you will know of. Last year we spent about $1 million doing first pass soil or till geochemistry on 4 of the projects. This year we're going to be advancing each of them with first pass geochemical sampling, and I expect that prior to the end of 2022 we will have put a core drill on very likely 2 of our projects. So in Newfoundland, and in contrast to Roger, who's down the track and has made 2 very nice discoveries, we're new kids on the block, full of enthusiasm, vim and vigor, but we're just starting.
Thank you. Well, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And just to learn more or hear more about each of your projects, what unique technologies, strategies, or methodologies are you using, and what did they mean for the industry? So I might just I'll go backwards and start with you, Adrian.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So let me just talk to technology and strategy. I've been in this exploration business for 4 decades now. I'm probably the oldest of the group. But, with every exploration project, you have to choose which methodologies you're going to use. Our industry in my career has seen significant developments in technology. When I started, we didn't even have laptop computers. There were no GPSs, there were no smartphones. We've got all those things now. But speaking specifically about techniques and new technologies in Newfoundland, much of what we are doing and will do is not necessarily brand new technologies, although we continue to try and use the appropriate technologies, those that are cost effective and ones that we think are appropriate to our search. So, do you focus on geochemistry? How much money do you spend on geophysics? And then, of course, there are new toys coming on the market. Portable XRF machines, which is like a great big revolver you hold on the rock and it gives you an analysis. Those would never identify gold grades, but there's a new model coming out developed by somebody that potentially can tell you the gold grade of your sample. I'll believe it when I see it, but technology is advancing all the time and makes our work more effective, progressively more effective.
Absolutely. And Roger, what about you?
Yeah, well, like I said, we've been working here for about 18 months now. We've been to the first pass using soil and till geochemistry, but probably the most important thing for us and something that I strongly believe in is the structural architecture of the area that we're working in. We're looking for orogenic gold deposits, and we know that those gold deposits are very frequently associated with second or third order structures off main first order structures. So even before we started working on the ground, we had a regional structural interpretation of the area done, and that really guides everything that we've done since, including the geochemistry, the geophysics. And so I think paying attention to structure has really paid off. As I mentioned, we've made 2 discoveries, one at Big Vein, one at Golden Glove, and both of those discoveries were actually made by prospecting, following up geochemistry, mostly soil sampling in areas where we had intersecting structures. And so it's not necessarily new technology, but it still works. And we're very fortunate in Newfoundland that we can actually discover these things by prospecting. On some of the technology that we are using that's different, RAB drilling, Adrian mentioned Shaw and Ryan and Ground Truth. They're big proponents of RAB drilling. We've used it quite extensively, and it's working well for us. The portable XRF is great, especially now that we don't have assays until several months down the road after we send the samples in. We can't see gold, but we can get an idea of it from arsenic and antimony. And then finally, I think the capturing and storing of all that data, and we have a lot of it, is something that we also focus on. All of our prospectors, geotechs, when they go out in the field, they take phones with them to capture that data, and it's a very simple system that anybody can use, and we don't lose data. So that's probably about it in a nutshell.
Great, thanks so much. Luke, what about you in Nucor Gold?
One of the things that we were able to use very early on in Ghana was there was a very large regional study that was done that looked at the country as a whole and then honed in specifically on Southwest Ghana. The study was commissioned by the Ghanaian Geological Society, and it essentially used machine learning as well as AI to look at the country as a whole, Southwest Ghana, and identify where some of the most prospective targets were within the country. Obviously, one of the things that you need for machine learning and AI is a huge amount of data. And one of the things Ghana has is with 200 million ounces historically discovered, 5 million ounces of production a year, there's a huge amount of data that can be used to feed into these types of studies. And it essentially identified that 3 of the top 10 prospects within Southwest Ghana sit within our Enchi project. So that's something we were able to leverage off of that was done independently within the country. And then, once we've kind of identified, our Enchi project as a very prospective area, then using a number of the more traditional techniques of soil sampling, airborne geophysics is something that we've done across the project. The use of drones is another thing that's been very beneficial, both in terms of 360 imagery of our entire project, as well as airborne geophysics and topographic maps as well. Instead of using helicopters, obviously that's a much more efficient way of running these across our project. And then I guess lastly, the other thing is using a lot of modern equipment on our project, specifically on the drilling side of things. Again, because you have so much production and activity within Ghana, you can get really good drill rigs onto site. So we've got, some of the best drill rigs in country currently drilling. And that really means that our employees are safer. You have less potential for environmental issues. So those would be a few of the things from a technology perspective that we're leveraging at our project.
Great. And we'll discuss more of those for sure. Joe, how about you?
Certainly reiterate the other guys have said for sure. I think grassroots exploration is a very tough place to innovate, given the type of work we do and our limited budgets and the relevant market pressures where we need to add value within certain time pressures. But it is crucial to allow for discovery of new deposits. And so people like ourselves need to be open to all new technologies as they come online, either to test or even beta test, to ensure that we are getting the best bang for the buck and increasingly finding deposits in complex systems, deeper, lower grade, and in high stress environments. So I think it's crucial that we develop those innovative techniques. And at Ethos, we've developed or have combined a huge technical team that is very open to testing all of those theories and coming up with ideas on new ways to do things and collaborate on projects and to figure out new ways of exploring to maximize that success and reduce our risks as much as possible. And I think this type of leadership that is all encompassing across our team from the bottom up ultimately really helps us reduce our risk to make discoveries in the long term.
Dasha, could I make a comment about strategy?
Absolutely, yeah.
We who work in the exploration space and just not geologists looking for gold, for many other commodities, we can basically go anywhere in the world. But an important part of strategy is, well, what are the best places in the world to go to? And firstly, from a fiscal perspective, from legislation and safety, there are a lot of places in the world you don't want to work in. The second thing is geological endowment, and then to what extent has systematic exploration been carried out. And I think Newfoundland is an interesting situation because it seems to me that for some reason or other, Newfoundland's been neglected to some extent as a jurisdiction to go and look for gold systems. It has a long history of mining. Mining's been an important contributor to the economy of Newfoundland. But all of a sudden, we've recognized that it is actually a really, really good place on the planet to explore. And there's been a number of really interesting discoveries, high-grade ones, lower-grade ones that have been made. And so, where to go and where you might have success with the minimum amount of money being spent, I think is a key criteria of us working in the exploration space.
Yeah, of course. And so with all these methods that you were all mentioning, are they primarily for efficacy, efficiency, or for ESG, like some of you mentioned? I'll throw it to Luke first.
I think it's a combination of all of those things. I mean, if I break down the three areas that I talked about, I mean, from a drilling perspective, if we look at the drill rigs that we're using on site, the RC drill rigs that we're currently using can push down to 400 meters, which is very deep for a RC rig. So from a cost and efficiency perspective, we're drilling at $85 a meter using an RC rig, our diamond rigs cost us closer to $225 all in per meter for the diamond rig. So once we've identified where these structures are, and a lot of the drilling that we're doing is focused on the oxides within the top kind of 100 to 150 meters from surface, being able to drill 2.5 times the number of meters with these RC rigs makes it a much more efficient way of drilling. From an ESG perspective, I highlighted that using modern equipment, it's like having a 2021 car versus a car from the 1990s. You're going to have much less chance of oil leaks or other issues when you're using modern state-of-the-art equipment. So from an environmental potential impact perspective, that really is a differentiator. So that falls, I guess, into the ESG category on that front. In terms of drone surveys, using drones instead of helicopters, again, a lot less impact in terms of the environment when you're using those types of surveys as well. So I mean, those would be a couple of things from a that I just kind of highlight in terms of efficiency as well as ESG. All of that feeds into it. And then I guess lastly, the fact that again Ghana has so much mining services in country, as well as there's a huge labor pool in country of talented miners and explorers. It means you're not having to ship equipment from all over Africa or people from expats from around the world. You can have everyone based in country, which then creates more more benefit for the Ghanaian economy. The fact that you're hiring Ghanaians, you're using Ghanaian service companies. All of that then obviously feeds into ESG as well. So all of those things wrapped together, again, is one of the real benefits we've got with our Enchi project.
Yeah, great. Joe, is it the same for you? Is it a bit of everything?
Yeah, certainly. I think they benefit all three, and particularly ESG has become front of mind for all exploration companies, whatever stage they're working at, whereby we're accountable for our footprint on the ground and elsewhere. And open and honest conversations with and collaborations with those all those stakeholders, including the investors, is becoming increasingly important. And I think the investors are more commonly seeking out those companies that are making a sound priority of ESG in public these days.
Yep, absolutely. Adrian, how about for FollowUp?
Yeah, I want to come at this question from a different perspective. In this junior exploration space, by and large, we use other people's money. Eric Sprott was one of our foundation shareholders. He put $3 million into our company. So doing cost-effective exploration is really important because, Eric's not interested in us having a fancy office in St. John's or, driving the latest monster SUV. He wants to see money in the ground. And so, all these other things that my colleagues have mentioned are important, and I don't want to repeat them, but it's very important that the money goes to the most effective technique that eventually will lead you to a discovery.
Yep, fair point. Roger, how about for you?
Well, I'm not sure there's too much more to cover. I think everybody's done a pretty good job of covering it, and I certainly agree with everybody. And Adrian brings up a very good point that perhaps is sometimes forgotten, that money that you're entrusted with by your investors should be put into the ground as much as possible, and not wasted either. I mean, you have to have a good strategy in order to apply that funding in a common sense way to advance your project. And I think like big investors like Eric, they know what the risks are, and they're not going to be unhappy if you spend that money wisely and you come up short. That happens all the time in exploration, but they would be justified in being angry if you wasted the money on fancy toys or offices or houses or whatever the case may be. So that's very important. Environment, we do focus a lot on environment, which is really why we use the RAB drill quite a lot. Trenching, of course, makes a bit of a mess in some cases, although it can be rehabilitated. The RAB is very, very efficient in that in that respect. It can get around. You don't have to do too much preparation, and it's very efficient for actually. We can drill a 60-meter hole a day, and just to test the geochemical anomalies. So it's a really good rapid tool with low impact. And again, hiring locals, it's a no-brainer these days. You just there's no reason not to do it. And I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I'm sure everybody has this in mind, is teaching and mentoring young geologists and people that you bring on to staff. That's something that's important to us as well. We have a fairly young team, and they're doing exceptionally well, but that's important for us as well.
Great, thank you. We actually just touched on a point that from a question that we just got in, so I might just ask that one now. Adrian's asking from the audience, is asking, is the mining industry struggling to attract enough younger people into a career in mining? And I guess you answered a bit of that by educating, but I guess open floor, like what is your perspective on attracting younger people into mining?
Dasha, I would say yes.
Yes, okay. I guess other solutions.
I would disagree a little bit in that there are probably more younger people available than there are experienced geologists. There seems to be a complete dearth of experienced geologists these days. So in some respects, it's possibly easier to bring in the younger recent graduates or even students and train them up. And I think the industry has had probably a bit of a bad rap in the past, because we would hire people for just a summer and then they'd be let go. And I think it's important, as far as we can, to keep those people on and make them part of the team, especially if you're going to put the time into educating and mentoring them.
Absolutely. We have been actively pursuing student opportunities at various universities for various projects, and bringing them on as total green geos, teaching them the ropes to see if they like it or not. That's really the only way to get them involved at that stage, ultimately.
Yeah, I think for Ghana specifically, Ghana has been an exporter of talent across all of Africa and around the world. So one of the things we've been really able to benefit from is a number of geologists who've been working all over Africa and commuting on a 2-week on or 3-week on, 1 week off basis, have been really keen to get back to Ghana. So all of our senior geologists are Ghanaian. All of our employees in country are Ghanaian, and a number of them we've been able to attract back from other parts of West Africa and other parts of Africa because they want to be within a 4-hour drive of home. Specifically on the student side of things, there are a couple of mining universities within Ghana, both in Kumasi and in Tarkwa, and it's a very sought after job within the country. So we're on a daily basis getting, resumes coming through our inboxes with very qualified individuals looking for work. So it has been something that, again, with 5 million ounces of production in Ghana, there's a lot of talent there who's keen to be working in country and close to home.
That's great. Thank you. So we heard a bit about the technologies and strategies each of you are using. I'm wondering, what have the results been so far? Can you speak to any upcoming catalysts that might prove your case? I think I'll start with Adrian. Trying to give everyone a floor.
Thank you. Yes, we got off to a start with our exploration in Newfoundland last year, towards the end of the summer. And following the lead of many other of the explorers working on the island, we chose to do systematic soil or till geochemistry using a team that's allied with Sean Ryan and Kathy Wood, called Ground Truth Exploration. So we spent close to $1 million last year working on 4 of our properties. We collected about 10,000 samples, have most of those results back so far. We're pretty happy with what we've got. Mind you, that was a first pass and fairly broadly spaced sampling, but it sets the foundation for us to get back in the field in May and do additional sampling. And as Roger said, get boots on the ground and try and see if there are outcrops. And I think a very important point that Roger made is that the two discoveries, the two very significant discoveries that his company's made on this major structure, which hosts Newfound Gold's discovery, it was people with boots on out in the bush searching in the areas where you have anomalous soil geochemistry, but finding either outcrop or large boulders with veining, and so that's the activity that our company will be pursuing for the balance of 2022.
Great, thank you. Joe, what about for you and Ethos?
Yeah, Ethos similarly is in a very early stage, and so we've spent a lot of time and technical thought and effort on putting together projects, doing a lot of historical data compilation work, as well as using LiDAR, XRF, and the other methods that we've already talked about to bring these projects up to drill-ready stage, ultimately, where we're able to test that theory. So our up-and-coming catalysts would be, we'll leave that to the drill bit, and we'll find out pretty quick if we have something to offer here. So yeah, we're pretty excited for this season and what that drill bit's going to say.
Great, thank you. Luke, any upcoming catalysts?
I mean, the big focus for us has obviously been drilling 90,000 meters. It's the largest ever program. I think in terms of, the results that we've had, we did put out an updated resource in June of last year. That outlined 1.4 million ounces. And, we've significantly extended the overall size of the mineralized footprint at all of our deposits. We've made 3 new discoveries. 2 of them we announced yesterday. So that's obviously a bunch of the airborne geophysics that we talked about. A lot of the soil sampling that we've done on the ground, led to us being able to make those new discoveries. And then also we've been making high-grade discoveries at depth as well. A lot of the focus has been on the first kind of 100 to 150 meters with the historical drilling. But now we're starting to drill below 150 meters for the first time ever. So those have been a lot of the results, and drilling results will be what continue to drive the company going forward.
Great, thank you. Roger, any results or upcoming catalysts?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of gratifying when as explorationists we see that our methodology is working. And I think we're at the point now where we've got a pretty good idea of what works here in central Newfoundland, and it's a matter of replicating that in different areas of the property, which we are doing. Again, the catalysts right now are mainly from the drill rig. We're still drilling at Big Vein, which was our initial discovery, and we have drills on 2 other targets. There's diamond drills on 2 other targets and a RAB drill on a 3rd target. So, and these targets are sort of strung out along the Appleton Fault Zone, which is the major structure. So it still comes back to structure and where we really focus our attention. And so far, it's been working well.
Great. Thank you so much. So I want to talk a bit more about mining in general, the industry. Do you think that the mining industry is slow to innovate, and why or why not? Do you think that? Luke, take it away.
I wouldn't say it's slow to innovate. I mean, there's thousands of years of history of mining, and the industry's constantly innovating. A lot of it may not be seen by the average investor, but on the ground, especially at producing assets and operations, underground operations, there's constant innovation in terms of what those operations are doing to become more efficient. And if you look at what's happened with the use of solar power in the last 10 years. There's a lot of mines globally now, small LNG plants to power, to power mines. All of these things are constant innovation within the mining sector that often gets lost when you're looking at quarterly earnings and those types of things. But the operating teams within all of these organizations are obviously looking to continue to make them more efficient to drive costs down. So I think, the mining industry is on the forefront of innovation, but a lot of that won't be seen by the, by the average investor. Automated trucks would be another great example of that. Automated trains. I mean, all these things are on the forefront of innovation, but again, they often don't get seen by the average investor.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Roger, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with Luke on that one. It's a lot of innovation happens in the background, and in exploration as well as in mining. And I think historically the mining industry, or the exploration industry at least, has suffered from the idea that it is slower to innovate. And perhaps if we compare it to oil and gas industry, then yes, might be right, because certainly oil and gas industry has lots of great drilling and different probes that they use downhole, and the mining industries, the exploration industry is catching up with that. So for sure, it's getting better. And all the AI, the deeper looking geophysics, the trend to exploring undercover with these different techniques. I mean, it's innovation based on the needs, I think, of what people are trying to do, and that's really what I think drives it.
Thank you, Joe. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Roger. I think innovation in mining is playing a little bit of catch up with oil and gas and a few other industries, but it's made significant strides, I think, in the last decade or so. And with such a innovation being market driven for the most part, and the commodities markets kind of switching from oil and gas to more metals potentially driven with electrification. Certainly we might expect that pace of innovation to continue to speed up on our side of things in the short term, I imagine.
Adrian?
Yes, I don't think we're reluctant to adopt new innovations and new methodologies and new equipment. We've talked about LiDAR, we've talked about drones, the satellite imagery now that has a resolution of 30 centimeters, that kind of thing. There is one other aspect of this topic of innovation is that, there are organizations like MDRU in Vancouver at the university there, and CSIRO in Australia, who are in the forefront of looking at developing innovative technologies. And I think one of the aspects of us in the exploration business that we're really needing innovation is on drilling. I mean, we still do a lot of core drilling, and that's quite a slow process. CSIRO in Australia looking at trying to develop different techniques for drilling. Rather than having rigid rods, you've got a roll of pipe that can be the drill rods. And there's also work being done at various places in different parts of the world as to how to look through till or weathered rock at the surface, because pretty well anything that's sticking out of the ground has been found and dug up. And so what we're facing is looking for deposits that don't have an obvious surface expression, and we've got to use different techniques to try and find those.
That's very interesting. I guess my follow-up question is, do you think institutional and retail investors reward or punish innovation? I know a lot of you said that investors don't often see the innovation, but I guess I'll open the floor to anyone who has any comments.
Yeah, I could kick off that one. I think that, as we've said, it's usually in the background. So, but obviously, the investors, whether retail or institutional, are there for the discovery, and they're going to be very happy if your innovative techniques lead to discovery. So, and perhaps perhaps that's the only time that we hear about the innovative techniques, is if they do lead to a discovery. We probably don't hear about the ones that just didn't work out for whatever reason. But I have one anecdote, which is we first started using the RAB, that's the rotary air blast drill, here in Newfoundland in 2020, and I put out the first results of the RAB drilling, which I thought were okay. They weren't barn burners, but we outlined a geochemical anomaly, gold anomaly over about 300 meters, some decent widths, but the grades were, I think the best grade was like 2 grams over 3 meters, something like that. And I got just hammered with phone calls like, why are you doing that? What's this RAB? That's totally ridiculous. Why are you using it? So obviously in the news release that I put out, I didn't explain it very well and why we're using it. And so, yeah, I think if it works, then they're going to be happy. But if it doesn't work, maybe just don't say anything about it.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with Roger. I would add that perhaps the onus is on us to communicate it better in press releases or otherwise, particularly as it relates to ESG, that our investors are concerned about. That we probably need to step up and put that at the forefront of our communications.
I guess the only other point I'd add is, if you're all in on some new technology that's going to completely make or break the company, that's one thing. But if you're using, innovative technologies as part of your overall, exploration program, and it represents a small percentage of your overall budget, then that's one thing. I think, the big blow-ups that you hear of, or the big successes, are where someone's put all the chips on the roulette table and it's boom or bust. And I think back to the comments about, what the big mining companies globally are doing, whether it's automated trucks or trains or, underground mining that's using, remote operators, these types of things. I mean, inevitably, their R&D budget's huge, and they're using a small percentage of their overall budget to, explore those kind of things. And as they're successful, they'll eventually end up rolling them out throughout their entire organization. So it really, I think there's a big element to that as well.
Dasha, I'd like to ask Joe a question if I could. Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Adrian.
Joe, I'm very familiar with a number of the members of your team, and it's a very powerful group of people. And I'm just interested to know why you've chosen the strategy of largely focusing on greenfields exploration when, you said it's hard, but a number of the very major deposits around the world have been found using that methodology. And it's hard. It's a hard method. It's a hard strategy, I think, to raise funds. So what was the thinking of the group?
Yeah, it's pretty unforgiving, kind of a drill to kill kind of scenario that we have. But we came across some ground that we had great ideas on, and when we delved a bit deeper, it had really been forgotten, and we couldn't find any technical reason, either in the rocks or otherwise, why it hadn't really been explored further. And so it's cheap and easy to pick up ground in various jurisdictions, and so why not give it a shot? We had support from management and elsewhere with our investment dollars, and so that's kind of how it started. Yeah, going for the big one.
All right. Do you have any follow-up, Adrian? Or
no, I think that you've got to be brave to go into the grassroots sphere of the search process to find deposits. But that, as I said before, much of the planet has been walked by geologists, and so we've got to look at new technologies and new approaches to make discoveries. And if you look at if you look at our record of discovery, certainly our record of finding major deposits, and not just gold, but copper and nickel and zinc and some of the battery metals, a lot of those deposits are not showing up at the surface because there's been such a lot of work done. And so we've got to think about how do we tackle this problem of providing the world with these important commodities, and how do we do it very cost effectively when we've got shareholders who are saying, well, why haven't you come up with something? Why is it taking so long? Why haven't you started drilling? And so there is certainly an important place for this early stage exploration using geological fundamentals to drive where to look and where to try and find new systems that have these important commodities.
Absolutely. Well, so Joe, you mentioned that communication with investors is so important. We have a question here. What more can the mining industry do to explain to the general public its important role in the global economy? And I'll just open the floor up to anyone who has an idea.
I think this one's really hard question because we are in general not well liked across the board. And it's very hard to convince people that we are necessary evil ultimately, and that metals and products and commodities are essential to everyday life. And we have been helped by non-profits and groups like Down Under and PDAC that really help in that regard. But for those that aren't really listening, that it's a very, very, very tough sell.
I think I think from an EV perspective, and that I think has been a message that is really resonating with people. I mean, look at what's happened in the uranium sector in the last 6 months. It's gone from being an evil sector to now it's being classified as green energy. And I think there's a recognition that we need nuclear to ultimately power the world, and that the current power that's being generated isn't as friendly as we expected, and as a result, uranium's one area, copper in terms of electric vehicles and the necessity for copper within those, as well as lithium and a number of other metals. I think that whole message is really starting to resonate with the broader population, and I think the more that can get pushed and discussed is important. The other big thing I think is constantly reminding the benefit that mining is doing for very remote, often remote parts of the world, bringing world-class jobs to remote communities that ultimately transform a number of these communities in terms of the growth and the jobs for people there, and the economic benefit that all of that has for these different areas. So I think really continuing to highlight, and I think a lot of that feeds into ESG in terms of the amount that mining gives back to the community as a whole. So the more that can be talked about, I think the better.
Absolutely.
Dasha, I would say a couple of things. I think if you look backwards, our industry's not done a very good job of respecting the environment. We're seen to be messy, dusty, digging huge holes in the ground, tailings dams bursting. So, our industry's got to do better. But I think being more specific and trying to answer the question from Adrian, which is, what can our industry do to explain our role? I think we've got to spend more time in the classroom at schools, and I think we as individuals need to pull up our socks and spend a little bit of time going to the schools where our kids are or our grandkids are, and saying, listen, guys, it's pretty simple. Everything we use is either mined or it's grown. And if you take the mining away, you won't have a classroom. Mum and Dad won't pick you up in a vehicle. It's a pretty fundamental thing. And if you can get kids to embrace that very simple concept early on, I think with time and with better behavior by us all, we will get hopefully more support from the world at large.
Yeah, I would agree with Adrian there. We do have a legacy issue, I think, and I do think it's getting better, but it's certainly not gone, and it's really up to all of us, whether exploration or mining, to keep that going in the right direction, so that we can turn it around and not have the industry looked at as such a bad place to be in the future. And I think different governments too play a part in that. Like the Newfoundland government is excellent in supporting mineral exploration and mining. They've actually announced that they want to see something like 3 to 5 new mines in Newfoundland and Labrador in the next 10 years or so. So that's a really bold statement, and it just shows that they are certainly understanding the economic benefit of mining and exploration too, because a lot of dollars get spent before the mine gets built to the local economy.
Thank you. I want to get back to some of the technologies each of you mentioned. A few of you mentioned AI. I was wondering what your experience with AI is in generating exploration targets. Open floor to anyone.
Yeah, we have just kind of started using machine learning, as we're calling it, rather than true AI, using layered data sets to recognize patterns, ultimately, to put us on the ground in a more efficient way. So trying to put us on target quicker, ultimately. That's the goal of our machine learning.
Dasha, last week, one of the presenters, a company working in Norway, I think, provided a very good example of the use of machine learning or AI. And the reason it worked for them was that they were looking at a part of Norway where there had been a lot of work over a long period of time. There was a huge data set. And so they took all that data and using some of these new techniques, were able to go from, I think, 400 square kilometers to 4 square kilometers without going on the ground, just by interrogating all the data. Does that apply to Gold Island at the very early stages that we're working in Newfoundland? And I would say no, we don't have enough information. We don't have a significant depth of information yet to apply some of those techniques. But in due course, I think perhaps we will. And clearly it's a new technology. Some people like me, read papers about it and scratch my head and think, hell, I don't really understand what this is all about. But it is important, and it's just one of a plethora of techniques that we will embrace as we go forward, searching for metals around the world.
I think it potentially allows us to be way more efficient with our very skinny dollars that we're putting in the ground ultimately.
Agreed.
That's where the benefit comes from.
Yeah, I think, Dash, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we were able to leverage a study that was done across Ghana and focused in on Southwest Ghana to really kind of support a lot of the on-the-ground work that we had ultimately done in terms of, the study that was done highlighted that 3 of the top 10 targets within Southwest Ghana sat within our Enchi project. So that really kind of gave us additional comfort in terms of all the on-the-ground work that we were doing. I think big data sets is one of the key things that drives a lot of the kind of AI and machine learning that's out there at the moment. So as Adrian was highlighting, when you do have past producing mines or projects that have hundreds of thousands or millions of meters drilled on them, being able to use all of that data is really what drives a lot of that AI and machine learning. So, at a grassroots stage, there may not be the same kind of data out there, but for some projects, it's been a huge benefit. I know Red Lake and other very well-established camps like that are now using, AI and machine learning to try to complement the traditional exploration work that they're doing as well.
Right.
Dasha, I see a question from Mal, and he's asking about what technologies help us be successful. And I think that would, the answer, leave us off some of the comments that we've just been making. You know, the introduction of computers into the entire activity around the world has been, you know, a very seminal development, and we're all aware of that. I think in the exploration space, we generate a lot of data. You know, every one of the soil samples that we've collected last year, we have a gold analysis, and we have analysis for 32 other elements. 20 years ago, that didn't exist. We didn't have the technology to do that. So progressively in this exploration business, we're developing larger and larger and larger data sets. And I think a key component is the analysis of those data sets and the interpretation of that information. And so, you know, that leads to machine learning and AI and some of these other things. But you have to have people with, you know, a good background in geochemistry and geophysics to interpret that data. And I've seen on a couple of the projects that I'm familiar with, because I'm a director of some other companies in addition to Gold Island, that, you know, young geologists take a piece of software and belt out some interpretation, and it's totally wrong. I mean, it's meaningless, but, you know, they're doing their best. They're enthusiastic. They're taking the software, but, you know, they need mentoring, as has already been mentioned, to say, well, you know, hang on, guys, you know, you've got all these elements that you're interrogating, but let's come back to some geological, geochemical fundamentals to interpret this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to lead ourselves up the garden path.
Yeah, I see you're absolutely right there, Adrian. And another aspect of Mel's question, there was how we take all this information and get it to the point where we can actually put it out to our investors in a way that they can understand it. I mentioned, for example, the RAB issue that we had that wasn't very well explained. And I actually had another one, believe it or not. I didn't learn from the RAB because I put out a news release about till sampling, which I thought was really, really good. And I thought I'd explained it. And it was saying that there is another source of gold close to these till samples. And I got sort of the same reaction. It was like, so what? Like, that's why are you putting out till results? We want drill results. So, I mean, we do have to be, and I went on, and I think this is part of the technology that we have now, which is good, because I went on subsequently, and I think we had a webinar or something which allowed me to actually go through it and say, look, guys, this is how important this is. This is a potential new discovery that we have here. And I think after that, people got it, but the initial reaction was like, what?
Yeah, you've got to say, Roger, you muffin, you know, till results lead to drill results.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the other thing from an investor and capital markets perspective, in terms of communicating, you know, stories and highlighting, you know, the opportunity that companies have. I mean, at Nucor, and I think all of us, the fact that we're on this webinar, I mean, 2 years ago, these webinars were hardly even existed, and now they're popping up on a daily basis, daily Zoom calls. I mean, the ability to virtually book meetings with, you know, with our company through our website, all of those kind of things are use of technology, as well as obviously all the different social media platforms out there, whether it's Twitter or YouTube, and creating video content. You know, everything's being digested in a much quicker and, you know, quicker manner these days, and creating short videos and those types of things to communicate the stories to investors is obviously very important. Another thing that we use at Nucor is Verify. So we can actually then, you know, show investors very simple 3D models, show them where drill results sit within those 3D models, show them cross sections, show them videos, show them core, all of these different things, as well as from an ESG perspective. I mean, you can go right into our site through our website, and you can go into the local communities, and you can see the school that we've renovated. All of those things, I think, are, you know, a use of technology that obviously highlights, you know, the mining industry, but also can make, you know, what could be interpreted on a news release as something very complex, much more understandable for someone who isn't familiar with the sector. So those would be a few of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was just going to say that comes down to communication. That's why these webinars are so important. It's a great opportunity to explain why you use the things you use to investors, and they can ask you questions. We have a few more questions and not so much time. I want to look a little bit to the future. In the future, will exploration data storage be an issue when machine learning is standardized for data capture via very high resolution images? What are your thoughts?
I think for small companies like ourselves, certainly our big data, relatively big data for us, is becoming more of a challenge. But if you compare it to other industries, certainly it doesn't even cross the threshold of big data. And so, no, I don't necessarily see that as a factor. We'll likely be moving everything to clouds of various sorts and types as we grow in the data front.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of our early decisions, which turned out to be pretty good, is to have that data in the cloud. When we started working, really when we started drilling, I guess we didn't do it the first year, but when we started our drilling program, we decided that we didn't want a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets that everybody had, and nobody knew which one was the latest version. So everything is in the cloud. Everybody accesses it. Everybody can upload it, or not simultaneously, but it works really well. And I think that's the way to go as soon as you get to that milestone where you're going to be drilling a significant drill program and you want to store that data.
Dasher systems, platforms like Ignite, are very good because that your data is safely stored. And I would say, compared to Bitcoin, the amount of data that the entire world's mining industry has is minuscule.
That's a very good point. All right, I'm going to jump to an attendee question here. So Adrian's saying that essay labs seem to be a bottleneck currently. Are there any technology or technological developments that could speed up essays?
This is a tough one. Assays, particularly gold, that assay method has been around since time immemorial, pretty much. And so the assays, the labs are stuck on that portion. And the delays in labs of late have just been a factor of demand, ultimately, of us throwing crazy amounts of samples at them and them not being able to cope. And they're not going to expand to such a level that could meet that demand in such a short term. If their market drops off a little bit and their demand drops over the next 5 years, so they're not going to invest that kind of cash. But having said that, there are new technologies coming out of the gate, particularly in gold, that Newfound particularly is the crisis photon method, which doesn't assay in remotely the same way that a traditional assay would. It does not ruin the sample. It crushes it, but it doesn't go anywhere. It just gets zapped by lasers and other things to come up with a gold number. And so it's those types of technologies, hopefully, that will increase in their use over the short term. We'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've used to get around it in a little ways is the portable XRF. Mm-hmm. There's a very good correlation between arsenic and antimony and gold on the Kingsway property, and we just look at the antimony and arsenic in the XRF data, and we can have a fair idea what the gold is going to be. It's not 1-to-1, but it gives us a little bit more comfort than not knowing anything.
There is capability with labs in other parts of the world. So, if you're brave enough to put your sample and your 100 grams of crushed rock in a paper packet and stick it in a FedEx bag and send it to Indonesia, in Jakarta, there's a lab that is accredited and has plenty of capacity. But I agree with Joe. The fire assay method and what we're using now it needs to be superseded. And we're looking forward to some of these machines, and there's not many of them around at the moment. I think there's one in Perth in Western Australia. Yep. If we had one in Newfoundland, it would be great.
Well, I think there's one coming to Quebec.
All right. Oh, good. Yeah. they'll be
Yeah,
swamped.
Ghana as well, that photon assay that they're talking about. But I think, that photon assay specifically, this goes back to the point that, from an R&D perspective, the ones who are the early adopters for that are primarily major mining companies who are getting, hundreds of thousands of assays done on a monthly, yearly basis. And they're taking a small percentage of that, having those tested from a photon assay perspective, then going back and comparing them to fire assays. So ultimately de-risking the overall technology so that, by the time early stage companies who are 100% reliant on exploration only and those results, it'll be de-risked at that stage. So again, it's part of the work that happens in the background that, a lot of investors and others won't see, but it is cutting edge technology that the early adopters and large companies are exploring and using. And all indications thus far is that, down the road, it will be the go-to technology.
All right, well, we have run out of time. I feel like we have lots more to discuss, but I just want to thank you all so much for your insight and such a really interesting discussion. Also want to thank everyone who joined us today and submitted questions. If you do think of another question following this panel, feel free to reach out directly to any of the companies or to SIX, and we'll make sure that they get your question and answer it.